Ladies and gentlemen, every supporter of President Trump needs to watch this segment. Every supporter of President Trump needs to subscribe to this channel. I'm going to give you the truth, the reality, the political analysis and evaluation that you need to hear today, especially today. President Trump, in terms of achievements, has been a fantastic president. First president to step foot in North Korea. We had record low unemployment for most of President Trump's presidency. President Trump allocated more funding to historically black colleges and universities than any president ever. Absolved $300 million in loans from Katrina. Signed the First Step Act. Renegotiated NAFTA. And created the USMCA. First president to sign an executive order combating anti-Semitism on college campuses, which is running rampant on college campuses, utilizing the definition from the IHRA. You look at the Abraham Accords, peace deals, lasting peace deals between Israel, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, reversing U.S. foreign policy, which is the most important thing to me. So you have Liz Cheney and 10 Republicans joining Democrats in impeaching President Trump twice. Liz Cheney probably doesn't care about all the peace deals, Serbia and Kosovo, and the reversal of U.S. foreign policy, which is exactly why I voted for President Trump, and I'm proud to have voted for President Trump. And I urged everyone to do so, because foreign policy, reversing U.S. foreign policy, is the most important moral issue we face as a country. You cannot allow, if you are a liberal, you cannot allow 20 years of counterinsurgency conflicts where you have veterans and their children engaged in the same conflicts. And this is unheard of, where we've stationed Americans and they're constantly in this powder keg. They're constantly located within regions of the world that can lead to absolute catastrophe within a moment, especially if you have numerous armies in numerous countries within one location, like President Obama, locations President Obama sent Americans to during his tenure. You have President Obama, who destroyed a country in Libya. Okay? You have President Biden now for 4 years. We're going to have President Biden for 4 years. President Biden has never had a foreign policy achievement in his entire life. You name one. His biggest debacle, well, two of his biggest debacles. One, he sided with Liz Cheney's father, Dick Cheney, and Rumsfeld and Bush, to get us into the quagmires that President Obama helped further. And so the Bush administration, Lincoln Project people that got us into these never-ending, horrendous situations are now embedded within the Democratic Party. So you have President Trump, who removed Americans from that region of the world and set the groundwork to remove us completely. We can go on basically, in 4 years, he was on his way to reversing U.S. foreign policy. He is the definition of an anti-war president. As close as we're going to get. He didn't embrace the intelligence community that have been wrong since the Bay of Pigs, the Gulf of Tonkin, WMD, now Facebook ads, which leads us to the past 4 years he went up against and was successful against corrupt intelligence officials. They had a special counsel against him. He was successful and victorious in completely circumventing. He didn't even have to circumvent. He overcame this absurd special counsel that Jeff Sessions began from Comey's memos. The government utilized baseless claims from Comey's memos to a Steele dossier. These were baseless claims. A memo written by a disgruntled former FBI chief, a memo written by a disgruntled government employee is not evidence. these are, if the reverse were true, they would say, okay, these are baseless claims from somebody who didn't like a Democratic president. These are baseless claims from an employee that was terminated by a Democratic president. But you had 92% negative media coverage. You had a Steele dossier was the definition of absurd nonsense and garbage that they utilized. Nothing was true in that dossier. None of the claims were true. Nobody was ever sentenced in a court of law with anything to do with that dossier. Nobody was ever sentenced for conspiring alongside Russia or charged. It never happened. So hit subscribe to this channel right now. Hit subscribe to this channel because you need to hear, I spent 5 minutes explaining why people voted for President Trump and why he's a good president. Now, I could spend 5 hours. He was set up and framed. The Steele dossier, the ODNI report, James Clapper, high to moderate confidence. These people are corrupt intelligence operatives. Clapper and Brennan lied under oath. They committed perjury during President Obama's administration. Brennan for illegally surveilling Dianne Feinstein in President Obama's Senate, and then he followed it up with perjury. But he helped create all the nonsense. You have President Trump is on the right side of history when you look at it. When historians, because you look at this time and you'll say, okay, what was this fascination with President Trump? Well, he went after people that tried to set him up and frame him. He didn't work with Russia. He never did. There was never any reason to investigate, and they wouldn't have treated them. Barbara Boxer is now a foreign agent. Okay? The Democratic Party is completely the most compromised political party, from Eric Swalwell falling in love and having a romantic relationship with the same country that has paid Barbara Boxer, which she has to register as a foreign agent, to the Steele dossier that was purchased by Clinton in the DNC, which was compiled apparently by one Russian intelligence official. You have a third-party tech firm that was outsourced to say that Russia interfered in the election or hacked the DNC. The third-party tech firm, Company One, was used to indict 18 Russian intelligence officials. There was no evidence from the United States government, and Company One in Congress said, we don't have direct evidence. Adam Schiff never had direct evidence. Dianne Feinstein never had direct evidence. Nobody had direct evidence. Clapper himself, with Chuck Todd, said, we don't have any direct evidence to state that Trump conspired with any intelligence. But they still investigated. Which brings us to what I've been telling people for 2 years. I've been saying President Trump, first of all, 2 things, and I'll get back to the 2 things after I address the third thing. I've been saying that Twitter is a horrible alternate reality. It's the most Orwellian, Kafkaesque cyber reality, cyber world, where you're constantly being judged and condemned and by disgruntled, apoplectic liberals who are the definition of irony and hypocrisy, who are not only disingenuous and duplicitous when you have 5 to 6 months of $1 billion in property damage, along with over 19 lives lost, and you have buildings torched, businesses set ablaze, police buildings in flames, and you have CNN saying, fiery but mostly peaceful, with a building that you can see is, completely in flames. The hypocrisy on that site is it's not only unbelievable, it's a glorified message board, which gets, I said, delete your Twitter account. I do not have a Twitter account. I keep telling people I don't have a Twitter account, and people are still duped by an impersonator that's breaking the law. I don't have a Twitter account. I do not have a Twitter account. But ladies and gentlemen, which gets us to the other issue, message boards are dangerous. The QAnon thing was the most absurd, horrendous hoax that is a dangerous hoax, and almost certainly political operatives from the Democratic Party started that thing because there's so many Trump supporters and Republicans who are yearning, conservatives who are yearning for justice. I have been documenting the fact there's a double standard on everything. There is. Okay, there is. If you read the Daily Caller, the Federalist, you can watch any conservative, Ben Shapiro to Mark Dice, anyone. They're all different ends of the spectrum. Everyone knows there's a double standard, even Democrats, but they justify it. But just because there's a double standard and, things are stacked against us and we don't ever really get any justice in terms of, Hillary Clinton uses private email servers, she's exonerated. Okay, or Comey can't find any intent, which the legal statutes don't mention. The specific legal statute pertaining to classified and top secret intelligence outside the U.S. government doesn't mention that. But he covered up. He covered up Clinton's crimes. And then you have Caligula, Biden's son. His laptop, completely covered up now. You have a whole bunch of things that took place. Any grievances that President Trump wanted to address the past couple of months, we can't investigate now because of the double impeachment. One of the biggest, most horrendous crimes of all time is what numerous governments, including ours, have done to, one of the most unfair things that's ever taken place. It's what numerous governments have done to Julian Assange. He should be free. But there's such a desire for, there's going to be arrests one day, and there's sealed indictments, and trust a plan, and everything will be okay, and patriots, and God bless, and this and that, and God is watching. It is a deceptive message board, and when you have it is. I exposed this 2 years ago. You can watch on my website. I told the world about the dangers of the absurd QAnon, conspiratorial nonsense. I told the world, and now you have the face of what happened in Washington D.C. being the LMNOP shaman guy. What was the point? Do you understand? The loss of life is the most important issue. Those 5 people should be alive. President Trump is not ever going to face a court of law because they'd be laughed out of court, Democrats. He's protected under the First Amendment for political speech, and he used the word peaceful. But my God almighty, how many people who went into that, and that woman should be alive, the officer should be alive, those 5 people should be alive. But how many people who went into that building believed that message board? I'm willing to say a good number. It is an absurd message board, ladies and gentlemen. And I know 99% of my viewers view it as such. But you still have people adhering, and I told everyone this. I said in 2018, I debated Jordan Sather, and I said the whole thing was absurd nonsense. That he was what's going on in that message board is they're manipulating the desires, the hopes, the angst, the frustration, the dreams of Republicans or conservatives that want to believe that one day we'll get justice because the arrests are coming. Or when I talked about when I talk about people getting indicted, it's because there's an active criminal investigation that's public knowledge. And if they don't get indicted, it's because almost certainly there was a cover-up. I mean, you don't have to say there are things that take place, cover-ups that take place where you can actually see. Okay, there was you're the FBI director and you didn't find intent. The FBI is known to go after people even if they don't have intent. So why inject that? But see, that's another topic. Don't listen to message boards. My God almighty, they have stripped every ounce of political power from us at this moment. I mean, the plan is horrendous. Jeff Sessions literally investigated President Trump. I've been telling people for 2 years this. It is an absurd, not only counterproductive, it's the absolute worst thing politically to believe a bunch of manipulative, deceptive political operatives. You believe a message board that is literally telling you to believe in the opposite of what reality is. There's nobody in government that was helping President Trump. Okay, the cards were stacked against him from day one. That's number one. Number two, Twitter is a horrible cyber reality. President Trump utilized it to his advantage, but see again, President Trump, I spent 5 minutes telling you about his accomplishments, and 15 minutes in, I'll tell you some missteps. President Trump has now turned into a Shakespearean character in a tragedy. He didn't cause what took place, but there shouldn't have been. The biggest misstep, aside from utilizing Twitter in a way that he perhaps shouldn't have utilized, the biggest misstep I'm talking about in the past couple of weeks, because once there was no push for an investigation, he probably should have let off the gas a little bit on Twitter. But here, instead of going, pedal to the metal. But what President Trump should have done is he should never have, I should say, pushed for a July 6th or a protests on that day. There was nothing to be gained. The emotions and tensions were so high, in part fueled by absurd message boards, more hoaxes. And he should never have had those the protests to begin with. Nothing would have been gained. He had 92% negative media coverage during his entire tenure. He didn't understand, ladies and gentlemen. Like, President Trump should not be impeached. He shouldn't have even been impeached the first time. He wasn't impeached on a crime the first time. And I think they tried to link a crime the second time, but they wouldn't. The Attorney General in Washington, D.C., and the mayor of Washington, D.C. haven't leveled charges at President Trump. Why? Because he's protected under the First Amendment. Political speech is protected. He used the word peaceful. So there's he didn't tell anyone to do anything. But the media is not going to look at, he should have understood who his adversaries were at this he spent 4 years fighting the same adversaries, but he was duped by them. They lured him into a trap, a media trap, or political trap. And he fell into the quicksand and he couldn't get out. And I said there were ways that he could have communicated, either going on Tim Pool or Joe Rogan or Ben Shapiro or going on MSNBC and CNN. There's a way to have communicated his viewpoint. He didn't effectively, and he's pretty good at marketing, but the past couple of months have been a whirlwind. So he lost touch of how to connect with the entire country. And so if you look in 2015, 2016, he was on CNN, he was being interviewed by Bloomberg, he was being interviewed and he was poised, calm, and collected. The past couple of months, he wasn't. He got rattled by journalists that wanted nothing more. Like Jonathan Swan, for example. It was very simple to just refute all of his claims against Trump, saying, look at the New York Times. Look at the New York Times statistics. Let me refute your claims. The highest per capita rates are in Democratic-run states. How on earth is my fault? How on earth is that my fault as president? The greatest number of aggregate lives lost are in Democratic-run states. Look at the New York Times. The majority of the top states, the worst outcomes, unfortunately, in the pandemic, and God bless the people of New York and New Jersey. Only the best people in New Jersey and New York. But they're run by two Democratic governors. How is that Trump's fault? They're virtually run by all Democrats, from the mayors to the governors to the senators. How is that Trump's fault? But see, again, he didn't communicate his vantage point. according to Democrats, he worked with Russia. He compelled people, even though in the C-SPAN quote it says, and I'm not talking about 1930s and 1940s Germans. He said they were fine people. That never happened. He said the pandemic was a hoax. That never happened. He was talking about the media coverage. He now is responsible for this. He's responsible for the pandemic. He's responsible for he worked with Russia. He's now responsible for this. That, if there was a meteor or like a comet that descended into Earth, he'd be responsible for that. But he didn't realize that they would twist and manipulate every single, or he wasn't aware, or he kept his eye off the ball, and he did not address the obstacles that he faced for the past couple of months in a strategic manner. And you have, initially, you had a legitimate, and I thought, and I was saying, look, Giuliani and Jenna Ellis are doing a good job. They did not do, in hindsight, a good job at all, because I thought, hey, they're at least drawing a line in the sand. Other attorneys were drawing a line in the sand, but now that line has been completely. You know what Pelosi has done? The Democrats have completely obliterated that line. We have to regain political power and influence, and we can. In 2022 and 2024. But I've been telling you, what do you need to do strategically and peacefully? And that has nothing to do with illegal activity, and nothing to do with message boards, and nothing to do with cyberspace. Cyberspace has been the undoing or the biggest detriment to President Trump. He used it to his advantage in certain cases for 4 years. But for example, he should never have called NFL players an insulting word. There are things that President Trump shouldn't have done. He didn't realize that the sensibilities of Americans, and I didn't realize this too, the sensibilities, like President Obama destroyed a country in Libya. That's an impeachable offense if there ever was one. His NATO intervention was an unmitigated catastrophe with a great many loss of with a great amount of lives lost, and now there's people being bought and sold in Libya. There has not been peace in that country since President Obama's since a decade ago, when President Obama engaged in a horrifically failed NATO intervention. He could have been impeached. If President Trump drank Flint water, he would have been impeached for that. There are numerous things that President Obama has done that Trump would have been impeached for, but mainly a foreign policy catastrophe, disaster, unmitigated disaster. And yet he acted presidential. And so that's okay, because he can destroy a country. But Trump, it is said that he called a country, you know what? And so that is worse than what President Trump did in destroying a country. Do you understand how the mind of American voters work, of American media? This is how we view things in the country. President Trump knows this. He built a brand, and he'll rebound. Now you have Deutsche Bank and the PGA, and everyone says, oh, don't even touch Trump with a 10-foot pole. He'll rebound. This is a country of people who rebound. This is a country of people who come back. Why do you think I love the Raiders so much? One of the reasons is because Jim Plunkett should be in the Hall of Fame. Jim Plunkett should be in the Hall of Fame. 2-time Super Bowl winner. Okay? He should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he's one of the great quarterbacks of all time. But he was on New England, and he was on San Francisco. This was in the early 70s. And, he found a home in the Raiders, and 2 championships later and 2 rings later, he was a Hall of Fame quarterback. But, I mean, he's one of the great quarterbacks of all time, Jim Plunkett. But you can go on forever. There's a lot of players on the Raiders that came back. But the point is, Trump's going to come back. Okay, the movement that he created needs to, like Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, Ron DeSantis, Devin Nunes, Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, Josh Hawley, and Ted Cruz should go on CNN, MSNBC every day. There needs to be a national dialogue and discourse, even if Democrats don't want it. Media is they've gotten people in a they've submitted President Trump's movement at this moment. It's like the difference though in jiu-jitsu, you can just tap and then you say, hey, okay, then you when you roll with somebody, I was studying jiu-jitsu, and it was before the pandemic. It was fantastic. It was amazing. And it was like I was getting my butt kicked all the time, which is fantastic because I was learning. And when you roll, you then, if you've had enough, if they submit you because obviously you're learning and you're new, you tap and they stop, and your opponent stops out of respect for you because it's about learning and it's beautiful. The Democrats are in the octagon now. There's no referee, and they're not stopping. And President Trump did this to himself in a way because he didn't realize the mistakes. He should have understood that there was a very, very dangerous and a very counterproductive message board hoax that was deceiving many of his supporters. I called out and I exposed to the world in 2018. People, like, I debated Jordan Sather and I exposed it to the world. It's a complete nonsensical hoax. But there's too many people that believe that eventually God will help and there's a good plan. This is the worst, almost could have been, I can't even imagine a more catastrophic outcome than this. And it's in part to people not realizing the political realities because they've been duped by cyberspace. President Trump should never have had that protest. Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis and other attorneys should have gone on MSNBC, CNN, should have NPR, whatever, NBC News, CBS, ABC. These are all, these places still exist. Of course, they've devoted their lives to undermining Trump, but there needed to be a national dialogue, and there wasn't. And you can't preach to the choir. You can't preach to the choir. That's why I debated Jordan Sather. I debated Richard Spencer. And I opposed his, hate-filled ideology. And I did what liberals and Democrats don't do. They elevate these people. I debated them using reason and logic, like Christopher Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens was one of the great Americans and one of the great, he's British, but he's American citizen and, just one of the great thinkers and polemicists and philosopher, really. He was an amazing man. But in today's world, he'd be viewed as a pariah. He'd be viewed as a person who pushes fascism. The left they have no ability to debate. They have no ability to confront any viewpoint they dislike or that they find horrendous. And they have all of these sacred cows and all of these, they worship in the altar of cyberspace. And if you take the fight to them in terms of reason and logic, they wilt. That's why if I was ever to debate anybody about why President Trump was a great president, which if you have, I would debate anyone with close to 1 million subscribers, my pleasure, on why President Trump was a great president. Yeah, he made missteps. President Obama presided over the destruction of a country. Tell me what President Trump did that's equally as egregious. But he should have created a national dialogue. He had the ability, and I was trying to say that for the past couple of months. There were legitimate concerns that needed to be addressed on a national scale. Why did Rudy Giuliani go to a press conference with the Just for Men? Why? What was the point? You know that any press conference is going to be just sliced and diced and eviscerated. Go to the conservative platforms and then don't just go to Newsmax. Go to Joe Rogan as well. Go to MSNBC and CNN as well. Communicate. We still have, although it's fleeting, we still have the ability in this country to communicate. Are you going to deal with combative journalists? Of course you are. Are they going to treat Democrats and President Biden differently? Of course they are. Simply pointing out the hypocrisy and the irony and the duplicity and the disingenuous nature of Democrats is irrelevant. They're, of course, hypocrites. But you have to overcome that, circumvent that. You have to communicate. There should have been a national dialogue. There should have been a discussion, a debate, or there should have been at least an attempt at having such a thing. And now, within the next weeks or months or year, at this very moment, there's virtually no political will within not only the Republican Party, but also like the Democrats or media. Everything is Trump's fault. And they're trying to erase him. They're trying to erase Trump supporters. They're trying to erase any accomplishment, any achievement, which is numerous accomplishments. I spent 5 minutes at the beginning of this video. They're running up the score like the 90s. I used to watch the 90s Hurricanes growing up. Okay. They're running up the score. Okay. They're tightening the vice. And Republicans are silent because they're afraid of the media onslaught. But Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz should be front and center. They should be everywhere explaining their vantage point. There still is time left for a national discussion on a whole bunch of things. But you need Republicans who are willing to get into the ring or actually speak to combative journalists. You need Republicans. You need Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley to do those things. They impeached President Trump again not really because of what happened. They impeached him again because they had the opportunity to. They're not going into a court of law because they'd be laughed out of court. They're running up the score. It's now we have President Biden for 4 years, so they won the game. But now it's like it was literally 2 minutes left, and they're still going into the end zone, and they're running up the score, and then their onside kick. It's 60-0, and they're onside. It's an onside kick. They want the ball again. There's 5 seconds left. They want to go into the end zone again, and we allowed that to happen, and President Trump allowed this to happen because of really bad advice. A legal team with zero strategy, really, my God almighty. I mean, the losses, there were some victories in terms of legal battles, but the losses were not explained. Like, there was no discussion. There was no dialogue. And how difficult was it, if you're a Republican, to tell the world that Caligula by the Sun was actually... Did nobody knew that Delaware U.S. attorneys there were investigating Caligula? Nobody? You mean to tell me there was no Republican that knew this? Because we know that a big part of the Republican Party are never Trumpers. But you mean to tell me nobody in President Trump's administration knew this? If William Barr knew, but he, was going back and forth, either helping Trump or, betraying Trump. But nobody found this out? Democrats have a virtual monopoly on political thought in this country. And it's with the help of Republicans who are never Trumpers. But see, those people will be silenced next. And then the far left will be silenced next. So these are issues that we all have to face, ladies and gentlemen, as a country and as a movement. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I used to be the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. The unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. I voted for President Trump because I want to reverse U.S. foreign policy. I want to bring home Americans. And he did a lot of other great things. But I understand Debbie Wasserman Schultz was forced to resign because of what they did to Bernie Sanders. I understand all of this. Democrats, their treachery is justified as well as just politics. But when Republicans don't even engage in acts that are just as egregious, oh my God, it's the end of the world. The hypocrisy is there, but there should be a national dialogue at least to point out this hypocrisy, and there wasn't. And the last couple of months, really the last year. Like the handling of the pandemic, it wasn't people are getting, shots in their arm because President Trump was able to accomplish something that had never been achieved. They were saying it would take a year and a half, and it happened. They were saying it was impossible that it could take place before 2021. It happened. There's so many achievements that President Trump presided over that are now trying to be erased from history. And there needed to be some way to communicate these achievements and the obstacles and a debate that President Trump wanted to foster. And he was just not successful in doing so. Like I said, he can still rebound. Like I said, the future is bright, but you have to make it bright. And you have to engage in only peaceful and thoughtful and productive and strategic, from a political sense, from a peaceful and political sense, ideas. Give me your thoughts below. Thank you so very, very much. I'll be back numerous times.